The Tyler Skaggs trial has revealed the absolute ugliest side of Angels baseball. And I guess at this point, we should just light a match and burn it all down.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Everything that's coming out about the Angels in this civil trial is just really messy. Testimony reveals an organization that doesn't follow its own protocols, let alone the protocols of MLB, and a lack of accountability and a lot of, I don't know, it's kind of the answers to a lot of it. It ruined the lives of the K family and the Skaggs family. They're left in the wake of the Angels' incompetence. It's bad, friends. It's really bad. So we're asking, where does this end? Where is the accountability? And when will Major League Baseball step in? Before we get there, we want to thank our sponsor, FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today.
Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
We've been doing this for 4 years here on Locked On Angels and get to talk Angels baseball with you Monday through Friday, every single weekday. We hope that you leave a smarter fan, a more informed fan, and that you feel like you've had time well spent after listening to Locked On Angels. Now, we've had a lot of fun this week in terms of doing our GM episodes, talking about potential trades. We had our everydayers get involved in that conversation as well. So just a lot of fun. Unfortunately, part of being an informed fan is taking a look at the ugly side of baseball, and in particular, the ugly side of Angels baseball. So we're getting into discussions about the Skaggs trial. It's a civil trial between the Skaggs family and the Angels organization. It's just money on the line. It's not criminal stuff. The criminal trial of Eric Kay happened already. Obviously, we know he was sentenced to 22 years in prison. However, this has major implications on the future of this team, Mike. And first of all, once again, all credit to Sam Blum of The Athletic, who's been doing an excellent job covering the trial, even before the proceedings began. And he's been in there pretty much every day, except for when Kurt Suzuki was introduced as the Angels manager. Mike, this week, he reported on quite possibly some of maybe the most terrible testimony I think that we've heard in this trial so far. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, Dr. Craig Milhouse was the Angels team physician for 31 years.
Is currently still the physician.
Is currently. And he prescribed Eric Kay 600 opioid pills over a 3-year plus time period. He prescribed Kay to take up to 6 Vicodin a day, as well as another opioid, Norco, at different times from 2009 through 2013. Milhouse said that at the time, he wasn't fully aware of how addictive opioids were until about 2014. And the issue with that statement is that Milhouse testified that he refers patients to pain specialists after suffering from chronic pain, which would be pain lasting longer than 3 months. And the problem is his opioid prescriptions for K lasted 44 months, John. Right. 44 months on pain medication, on opioids, on some of the most addictive pills out there.
In addition to that, it became really clear during his testimony that Kay served as a liaison between Dr. Milhouse and the players. And one player in particular asked for Viagra. And text messages between Kay and Milhouse really demonstrated this liaison relationship. And despite giving specific instructions for Kay to give to the player on how much the player should take, Milhouse did say that he chastised Kay and that he also did evaluate the particular player in person and gave him the same instructions.
Yeah, and then when asked about the legality of the action by Skaggs' attorney, Milhouse said, it would be illegal on my part to prescribe a medication to someone to give it to somebody else. And then Skaggs' attorney responded by asking, is it a violation of company policy to ask you to do something illegal? And he was referring to Kay's conduct, and Milhouse responded, I suppose, yes. And then he asked the Skaggs lawyer, did you report it? And Milhouse said, no.
Right. And again, This civil trial is all in service of who's at fault here. It's a wrongful death lawsuit. It's, do the Angels do enough to prevent all of this from happening, from Kay's addiction to the death of Tyler Skaggs, Tyler's own addictions, right? No matter which way you feel about this. And I know that a lot of people like to, put blame on Kay or put blame on Skaggs. That really has nothing to do with this situation. What it comes down to is what was going on during business hours, quote unquote, right? And during business hours, there was a lot of negligence, a lot of incompetence, and a lot of questionable decisions regarding how employees handled Eric Kay and his tenure with the Angels. Mike, here's perhaps the biggest kicker for the Angels' culpability in all of this. Major League Baseball has a drug policy oversight committee that creates a treatment program for MLB employees. And part of that program is what's called the Employee Assistance Program. It seems that each team has an employee assistance program, and Dr. Eric Abel was the one leading the Angels Employee Assistance Program. Now, normally the EAP gets involved after the drug use is reported to the commissioner's office. In this case, it was not. Kay was essentially handed off to Dr. Abel for psychiatric treatment without it being reported or confirmed to be reported to Major League Baseball. Dr. Milhouse claimed that he thought it was taken care of once Eric Kay was in the care of Dr. Abel, meaning he thought that the reporting process had all been followed. And since it wasn't, that's actually a tick in the box for the Skaggs lawyers, who are essentially arguing that the Angels did not follow MLB policies by neglecting to report Kay's drug use to MLB as required by MLB guidelines.
Yeah, this feels like it was probably the worst of the testimony, I think, right? The Vicodin, the liaison between players and the doctors not following MLB protocols. John, there's something in college football called a lack of institutional control. And coaches have been suspended or have lost wins or have lost bowls because they had a lack of institutional control. Hearing this testimony, that college football term should be applied to the Angels. A lack of institutional control. They're not following MLB protocols in addition to not following their employee handbook.
Yeah.
It was the testimony was more of this is more suggested than it is actually required. You and I both know, and anybody who's ever been employed at any time in their life knows, these aren't suggestions.
Yeah, they fired somebody
rules.
for much less when there was testimony that, I think, was it a janitor or perhaps a just somebody who worked at the stadium drank a White Claw. Not, and she said she didn't realize it was alcohol and that her husband packed it for her. I get all that, but neither here nor there, right? It's alcohol. It's being consumed on the property at work. And so she got fired. And so people have been fired for much, much less here, Mike. And look, I understand that there were a lot of unknowns about opioids back then and, the addictive nature of what that's why we have an opioid crisis in this country. However, this is excessive.
Yeah.
Like
600? I mean, over 44 months, he's given him
a day,
thousands and thousands of pills. And he didn't have pain. But that was the other
kicker,
right?
Yeah.
He didn't have any pain. And so why is he getting pills without pain? And why is it just kind of hush hush? And he's working for the Angels. He's their team physician. So it's not like, well, doctor-client privilege. Like, he's working for the Angels, and they had no idea. And you and I had this conversation yesterday after yesterday's show as we were preparing for today's show. And we were talking about like Michael Jackson's doctor, right? And then you mentioned Matthew Perry's doctor.
Right.
They went to prison because they were prescribing or doing things that were excessive. So it makes me wonder, I wonder what could happen unless there's some immunity for this doctor. I wonder what could happen to this doctor, because what this tells me, outside of the Angels for just a moment, what this tells me is that this guy was not taking his oath appropriately to do no harm, right? Because that's a lot of harm. That's a lot of pills. And that isn't a very healthy practice, is it not?
Right. And the fact that he was prescribing these pain pills when all the testimony so far doesn't line up with this pain pill thing where, you had Tim Mead, another employee, say, well, I thought he was just dealing with bipolar and anxiety issues. Right. So even if he was, number one, I don't know, maybe I'm naive to this, but I don't know that many anxiety pills that get you addicted the way that pain pills get you addicted. But number two, if that's what he was dealing with, there's no reason to be prescribing Vicodin and Norco. That's the stuff you have after like surgeries and like, you get your wisdom teeth removed and they're like, here, have this itty bitty tiny bit of Vicodin to
take
make
one
the
right
pain
now and then don't take one
ever again
until 60 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally the directions they give you, right?
So it's wild to me, Mike, that, I think that in regard to this doctor, he's got to have some sort of immunity. He's got to have some form of culpability, but it also extends to the organization, unfortunately. And for all of this to be going on under their nose, it's gross negligence, in my opinion.
It's a shoulder shrug. That's really what it is. And we've seen that all the way through this trial from a lot of Angels employees. Shoulder shrug. I mean, that's literally how they've responded to a lot of things. I suppose so is literally how they've responded to a lot of things.
I thought it was his job or her job.
They should run for some sort of political position because they're perfect for it, right? Like I don't know. I'm not taking questions at this time. I mean, that's literally how they've responded to this. And that is a reflection on leadership, man. That's a reflection on culture. It's a reflection on vision. As somebody who leads an organization, if there is a major issue and my higher ups and even those that are a few layers down are going, that's a problem, man. And I'm looking at myself going, okay, so I obviously have not created an environment of truth telling. I have not created an environment of accountability or responsibility. Yeah, you're right. Eric K should own what he did. And yeah, you're right. Tyler Skaggs, if he was alive, could have owned what he did, right? But that's the tragedy of an environment that the Angels and Arte have created of, look what happens. Like, there's always that like, wow, somebody could lose their life, right? That's always the threat of whatever, right? Whatever irresponsibility we have. Well, somebody lost their life because he was in a culture of shoulder shrug. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess. Maybe not my job. I thought it was his job. I think maybe it was this. I suppose that's right. That's been their answers the entire time.
And the thing about what you said about accountability for yourself, if you were in charge of your organization and you let things go on, you're accountable to your employees. Mike, technically, and maybe the people who attend your organization too, but technically there's nobody above you, right? So there's nobody who could come down and say, Mike, you need to get your house in order. Well, in this situation, there is. And it's Major League Baseball. And the fact that this is all coming out, oh boy, I think that's worth having a question of, or asking the question and having a conversation of, where does this end? Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up, we are going to talk about where this ends and if MLB is going to step in or should they step in. Plus, we've got more employee witnesses who didn't report what they saw. We'll talk about those in just a minute.
Today's episode is brought to you by Price Picks. It's the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Price Picks, being right means that you can cash in. And with football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on all of the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. Download the Prize Pick app today. Use our promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Check us out wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course, you can join us on the video side, whether it's your smart TV or over on YouTube, especially on YouTube, because you can get in the comment section and be part of the discussion. I know people have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this, and Mike, before we got into this discussion, kind of established, hey, here's where we stand as the Super Halo Bros, and those rules like still apply. They still abide, right? And so I know that we're getting into the nitty gritty of all of this, but we ask that, anybody who decides to jump into the comments, you need to be respectful of the fact that Tyler Skaggs lost his life. The family's dealing with that tragedy. Eric Kay's in prison. His family is dealing with that tragedy. He's got 2 kids. And so there's just, it's a sensitive issue all the way around. And the reason we're discussing this is because, again, of the implications it could have on team ownership, the implications it could have on the future of the franchise as well. So all of that to say, I think it's really important that we dive into this discussion. Mike, a number of Angels employees testified about Eric Kay's drug use and his behavior and the attempts to get him help. One of those employees was Cecilia Schneider, who worked in HR and was the benefits manager. So somebody who kind of works out, your health insurance and things like that. She was unable to be in court because of medical leave, but they did play video of her deposition for the jury. She was the one who approved Eric Kay's medical leave after he was hospitalized after being high at work. She maintained that she didn't realize his drug problems were related to illegal drugs and even helped him find treatments with 2 potential addiction specialists. However, the Angels employee handbook was referenced by the Skaggs attorney, which lists a duty to report, and she never told her superior in HR or the Angels legal team.
Yeah, and then ex-Angel clubhouse attendant Vince Willett testified that he personally witnessed Kay snort pills during spring training in 2016 or 2017. Kay asked him to stand guard. Willett said he witnessed the behavior, and he believed it to be a product of drug use. Now, Kay was sitting in a chair in the clubhouse. He was laughing at nothing. He became agitated. He said he didn't report it because he was worried for his own job, for his own safety, and he felt it should be reported by employees in Kay's department.
And then finally, another clubhouse attendant, Chris Constanti, spent 14 years working in the Angels clubhouse before being fired in 2020. He provided videos of the pranks and the dares that we've heard about previously. One was of Kay swaying and speaking very quickly. The other was him taking a 90-mile-an-hour fastball off the knee with players like Pujols egging him on and doing dares. Constanti testified that Kay told him that he had an opioid addiction. And then Constanti also said that he was the one who told Mike Trout what the dare money was being used for. And then Mike Trout in his testimony said that he stopped enabling those dares and that conduct after he was informed what the drug money was used, or what the money was used for, which was procuring drugs. So Constanti confirmed that notion that, after they were told what this was all for and why he was doing it, they stopped doing that. He also said he never told any of Kay's superiors because if I knew, they knew. And so I think that that's significant as well. Mike, given all of this, I can't help but sit here and think the Angels are losing this one badly, aren't they?
I'm trying to think of what it would be like to be on that jury. And if I'm hearing this, I can't see how this would make me go, well, the Angels did their part and this was not their fault.
They did enough. Yeah.
Right. And that's if you say, well, this is on Perry or on Arte or on, right. That's where I would go, okay, well, if you're trying to pin this on Arte or on Perry, it can it'll fall off. The problem is that Arte specifically, this is his organization, and those in his organization, they just didn't do their jobs, right? They just didn't do what was required of them. They either didn't know what the handbook said or they knew what the handbook said, but they were trying to be, and this is where I would give them credit. They were trying to be good humans, I think. They were trying to be good humans to somebody like Eric Kay, who obviously they had great affection for and maybe felt affinity for and had a friendship with. And as anybody who's watching or listening to this show, as you and I would, if we have a coworker who's struggling, we would do whatever we can to help. That's kind of how we're wired, right? How can we help them? That's not the problem. The problem is that whoever was in charge was not told explicitly. There was a, if I knew, they knew comment, right? But there was not the protocol that was followed of you have to do this. And that over and over and over again has come up in testimony. And they have given reasons. One of the main reasons, John, is because they're afraid. They were afraid to lose their jobs. And that means that there is a cognitive dissonance in upper management somewhere that has no idea what's happening in the quote unquote normal people, normal employees. And the truth is, as you grow in an organization, in your leadership and in your position, you do move further and further away from the problem and from the gossip and from the issues. This is why your strategy, your processes have to all be top-notch. You need to have top-notch HR people. You need to have top-notch executive team people. And you need to have top-notch employees that understand that we all hold the culture together. We all build this thing together. And there was a cognitive dissonance, not just from executive leadership, but also from those that aren't in executive leadership. They didn't feel like this was theirs. They felt like this was a job. This was their friend, but they didn't feel like they needed to do anything more outside of the friendship. There was no weight of responsibility on them to go and do what they were told to do based on the handbook. But if your handbook person, your HR person says they're more suggestions than they are rules, then that tells me why they didn't feel the responsibility to go and tell upper management what they saw and what they heard.
Exactly. Mike, I think what I take away from all of this is that there's so many employees who could obviously see what was going on, and even some who witnessed it in person. And it just, you mentioned, watching this from a jury perspective, it just goes against everything that other employees have said so far, or even former employees like Tim Mead saying, well, I didn't realize it was, illicit drugs. I thought he was dealing with anxiety and mixing up his pills. It's just, all the evidence points to, no, you knew that it was bigger than that. You knew that it was bigger than, mixing up anxiety medications or what have you, and all of that.
But still, I mean, let's be frank. Okay. Let me be really frank. I was Mike. Now I'm going to be frank. It's Tim Mead, right? Like you are in a higher up position because you are somebody that has earned the right to be there, so to speak. Right. And the fact that even if it was mental health medication, there needs to be a reporting of that, right? Yeah. There needs to be an awareness of that.
Well, and the handbook the handbook says there's no distinction between illegal drugs or prescribed drugs, and so again, that the handbook being a suggestion, as was testified to, that's another issue. Yeah,
it just feels like the Skaggs attorneys are proving the point, John. It feels like they're proving the point that there was negligence here, and that they are. This was not a great environment, and that this wasn't good for anybody, let alone Tyler. This wasn't good for anybody. And I don't know if it's changed because I'm not there. I'm not an employee, but you know what will happen after all this comes out is the Angels are so emotional that they'll swing the other way, and it'll end up being run in a like military sort of way, right? And then that'll just raise anxiety and fear. that won't help the environment. They won't think about like, we got to get a good coach in here and work with our teams, and we have to get good training in here and work with our teams. They're going to go, nope, we're just going to draw really hard lines. What is that a White Claw? You're out, right? I mean, that's literally what's going to happen.
Yeah. You were reading the description that Vince Willits said of Eric Kay, like sitting in a chair, laughing at nothing, becoming agitated. Like, it just broke my heart. It really just broke my heart. Yes. And the same thing, I'll say the same thing like with Skaggs. Like there was a point in this trial where, Skaggs inquired about an intern that he was interested in while he's a married man. And the problem with all of this, Mike, is that this had to go to trial. All of this ugliness is coming out about the organization, shady things with, Tyler asking about an intern, and that's got to be hurtful to the Skaggs family, obviously, because part of the money that's on the line here is the companionship factor. I don't know the technical term for it, but it's essentially, hey, I don't have my husband anymore, and so I'm being deprived of a lifetime of companionship. And the same goes for Kay. Just to hear these descriptions of him obviously struggling, obviously, like, this is, I hate to say it this way, but like, this is stuff you see on the street sometimes. And for it to get to this level within the confines of an organization, like I said before, I'm just using this phrase, kind of a throwaway phrase, but like on business hours, during business hours, to see somebody like struggling like that it boggles my mind how far this went for everybody involved. And it's just really heartbreaking at the end of the day, because again, I know that Kay's in jail for providing the drugs and all of that stuff, but it's heartbreaking. And I mentioned it earlier, like he's an ex-wife now, but also two young kids. And it's just like this whole situation has just really ripped families apart. And I think that it comes back to just like you said, a big shrug, negligence, and people trying to help out their friends and not like, well, I don't want to get them in trouble. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And so there's a lot that's here. But at the end of the day, it comes down to this civil trial that is dishing out the legalities of, did so-and-so do enough? Did the organization do enough? Are they responsible for not doing enough? And that's what's so hard about a trial like this is, yeah, there's some hard and fast rules and laws and things that should have been followed and done and all of that. But then it removes the nuance of human nature and human relationships and friendships and all of that stuff. And here we are. We're talking about it like it's a book report, unfortunately. But that's what it's come to. And that's where things have ended up with this trial. And again, it comes down to responsibility. And it's going to be a financial responsibility on the part of the Angels at this point.
The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on all of the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It just keeps every game really exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So given the testimony we've discussed previously on the show, the newer testimony we covered today, we just have one question, and that's, where does this end? Because if Bud Selig, commissioner of baseball back, when this happened, if he stepped in during the Frank McCourt ownership of the Dodgers, then why wouldn't Rob Manfred step in this situation? So I just want to kind of take everybody back to what happened when Bud Selig stepped in and the MLB took over the Dodgers. Frank McCourt and his wife were disputing ownership during a divorce. Frank McCourt couldn't make payroll without securing loans and TV deals. In fact, he was working on a deal to give Fox the broadcast rights to the Dodgers for 20 years, similar to what the Angels got around that time. Now, had that have happened, the Dodgers would have been on, Fox Sports LA and then Bally Sports and now on FanDuel. So it would have looked like that, right? Mm-hmm. So just to give you an idea, think of it as, what the Angels have gotten in TV. That's what McCourt was working on with Fox. Now, McCourt was going to sue the law firm that drafted up his prenuptial agreement. The reason why is because it was invalidated in court, and then that gave co-ownership to him and his ex-wife. And so he was going to sue the law firm that drew that up and use that money to pay back a $30 million loan to help cover payroll that he got from Fox. So Fox wanted to get the broadcast rights. So obviously they helped him cover the payroll with this loan. Just messy, right? Yeah. It's like, I'll get money for you here if you help me here, and I'll cover the payroll here. That's not how you run a baseball team. Then reports came out that the IRS was going to investigate the McCourts in response to allegations that they had been taking money out of the Dodgers for years without paying taxes. So it was just very clear that McCourt was unable to run the team and couldn't pay for it. So Bud Selig steps in, MLB steps in. Eventually they get a, court orchestrated sale of the Dodgers to the Guggenheims and the ownership group who own the Dodgers now, and the rest is history. So my question is, Mike, what's it going to take for MLB to step in here? If they're going to step in the McCourt situation, how do they not step in this situation?
Money. That's really what it's going to take. And that's really what it boils down to for each time that they have stepped in and have dealt with owners. Yeah, there's been nonsense around those owners. And we mentioned Marge Schott on the show before. We've obviously mentioned Frank McCourt. John, it's money. And if they're not making the money and if they're not handling the money well, that's when baseball steps in. And because this is the business. That's my gut. And if this ends up being a $200+ million settlement, right, with the court case, and that's what they have to pay, there's some indications that it's going to be a whole lot more than that.
Could be.
That could be a lot of money that Arte just doesn't have, right? And then I wonder if there's going to be moments where they can like go against that, or if they're going to retry it, or if they're going to, file a motion to pause it. Like, and we hear stories all the times about like, well, yeah, just because they sued them doesn't mean that they're actually getting the money. Right. And so that could be a situation, but my gut says they step in when it becomes financially lucrative to do so. And that's it. And that's sad.
It's unfortunate because you've got employees not following team protocols. You've got the Angels organization not even following MLB protocols. And then that's not even to mention what actually happened. You got an employee in prison. You got a player who passed away. And again, you can debate the choices that Kay and Skaggs made, but the key issue here is how much of this is on the Angels for letting this go on and happen during business hours, as I keep saying. Because to me, Mike, I think other companies would be punished for a lot less. And for the fact that the Angels have MLB oversight over them, right? Because they're one of 30 teams. To me, it just is like, how do you not step in? Because they're not following the rules of the league. And when you're grossly not following the rules of the league, that to me requires some intervention. But I'm afraid that you're right. I'm afraid it's going to have to do with money. Now, whether the settlement affects payroll or whatever goes into Angels baseball. If that's the tipping point, then that's unfortunate to me.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate because that's going to be the scaffolding. That's what's holding this whole thing together. But at this point, I think if MLB steps in at all, it's going to be, Arte, what are you going to do? I'll just fire everybody and we'll just clean house and we'll just figure it out. And that might be the solution. We'll just clean house, and maybe they already have, and maybe that's why some people have already been fired, right? They're trying to clean house and renegotiate some things. But ultimately, what baseball is looking for is that bottom line. And Arte can cry poverty all he wants, and that he's going to lose $50 to $60 million this year is what he said about this year. The dude's making money, and the Angels are making money, and we see that when it's on the sheet in front of us, when you see it on Wall Street or you see it in Forbes, right? Like you see that they're making money, and as long as they're making money, I think the baseball is going to go, yeah, you probably need to clean up a little bit of this and clean up a little bit of that. But make sure you're doing your revenue sharing and make sure you're doing this and make sure you're doing that. No, you can make payroll. That's why they stepped in with Frank McCourt. They're not going to make payroll. They're not going to, and they're trying to make this deal with Fox when it's probably not a great deal for the Dodgers and it's not a great deal for baseball. And this Dodger brand is a really great brand. And so we're going to need to make sure that we give it to the highest bidder. And Frank's not doing that because he's trying to get money for. That's why they stepped in. Yeah. They didn't step in for any other reason because they thought this was inappropriate. And that's what makes my heart heavy. Like it makes me sick to my stomach because they're not going to step in because someone died. They're going to step in because the finances don't look good. And that's disgusting. Yeah. And that's going to be the unfortunate reality of this whole situation. And again, it's messy. It's ugly. I can't believe the Angels let this go to court because look at everything that's come out. Since then, it is not a good look for the internal workings of this organization. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Make sure you're liking and subscribing to the show while you're here. It's the best way to stay updated on all things Angels throughout the offseason. Hey, be sure you keep up with us on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We'd love for you to jump into the comment section on YouTube, of course, for today's show. Mike, what do we have when we come back on Monday's show? We're going to talk about something different because we have to. First of all, I just want to let Debbie and Carly and the whole Skaggs family know, like we're thinking about them and also the K family. We know that they're struggling as well. And this is just heartbreaking and sad. I'm sure the employees are struggling as well. So that's the end of that conversation. On Monday, John, MLB Trade Rumors released their top 50 free agents. And they said, here's who makes sense for this team. Did they mention the Angels?
Hmm.
We're going to find out on Monday on Locked On Angels.
All right, looking forward to that conversation, and we hope you have a great weekend. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
For the sickos who love this team and for the everydayers who love to watch and listen, we'll see you back here on Monday.